For decades, schoolbooks swore the first Americans arrived just 13,000 years ago, armed with Clovis points and certainty. But in a shallow Oregon cave, scientists uncovered bones and tools buried deeper than anyone thought possible, evidence older than 18,000 years, shattering the textbook migration story. Why did everything we know about American origins collapse? And who led the dig that changed history? For most of the 20th century, the story of the first Americans seemed settled. Archaeology textbooks taught that the Clovis people were the continent's earliest inhabitants, arriving around 13,000 years ago. Their migration route, according to the Standard Model, began in Siberia. As the last ice age peaked, sea levels dropped, exposing a land bridge known as Beringia. This vast frozen corridor connected Asia to North America, making it possible for humans to cross on foot. Once on the continent, these early people were thought to have waited until a narrow gap opened between the immense Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets, an ice-free corridor that finally allowed passage into the heart of North America. The evidence for this story came from a distinctive kind of stone tool, the Clovis point. These finely crafted fluted spear points first appeared at a site near Clovis, New Mexico, and soon turned up at dozens of sites across the continent. Their unique shape, broad with a channel or flute running up the base, became a kind of archaeological fingerprint. For decades, every major find seemed to reinforce the same timeline: Clovis points, mammoth bones, and campfire remains clustered around the 13,000-year mark. The model was neat, logical, and easy to teach. By the late 1900s, this Clovis first paradigm had become the intellectual bedrock of American prehistory. It answered the big questions of when, where, and how the first Americans arrived. The idea was so deeply embedded that any new discovery had to fit its framework or risk being dismissed. The migration route was mapped in bold lines from Beringia to Alaska, through the ice-free corridor, fanning out across the Great Plains. The Clovis toolkit, those fluted points, was seen as the signature technology of the first wave. But as more sites were excavated and dating techniques improved, cracks began to appear in the story. Still, for most archaeologists, the Clovis culture and its 13,000-year-old spear points remained the yardstick for measuring the deep past. The stakes were high. If the Clovis first model was wrong, the entire narrative of how and when humans first reached the Americas would need to be rewritten. Rimrock Draw sits in the high desert just outside Riley, Oregon, where the sagebrush steppe stretches for miles beneath the basalt cliffs. The shelter itself is little more than a shallow overhang in the rock, easy to overlook in a landscape shaped by wind and ancient floods. But beneath that unassuming ledge, a different kind of history was waiting to be uncovered. Excavation began in 2011, led by Dr. Patrick O'Grady from the University of Oregon Museum of Natural and Cultural History. O'Grady brought with him not just scientific curiosity, but a tradition of fieldwork that stretches back decades in Oregon archaeology. The Rimrock Draw project was launched as part of the university's Archaeological Field School, a hands-on program where students and volunteers learn the trade by working side by side with seasoned researchers. Every summer, teams from the university set up camp in the desert, braving dust, heat, and the relentless wind to sift through the shelter's ancient sediments, one trowel at a time. The Bureau of Land Management, which oversees the public land around Rimrock Draw, partnered directly with the university, providing permits and logistical support. This partnership ensured that the work would be systematic, well-documented, and held to the highest standards. From the start, every find, no matter how small, was carefully mapped, bagged, and recorded. Sediment layers were peeled back slowly, with each stratum logged in detail. Students screened bucket after bucket of soil, watching for the glint of stone or the curve of ancient bone, while O'Grady and his colleagues kept meticulous notes on the context of every artifact. Rimrock Draw was not a one-person operation or a hurried rescue dig. The site became a living classroom, a place where new generations of archaeologists learned the discipline of careful excavation and the patience required for real discovery. The presence of both the University of Oregon and the Bureau of Land Management gave the project a level of oversight and credibility that would prove essential as the evidence began to accumulate. In this remote corner of Oregon, the collaboration between academic researchers, federal land managers, and student archaeologists laid the groundwork for findings that would challenge the very foundation of the American origin story. A thin, silvery band of volcanic ash slices through the Rimrock Draw sediments, instantly recognizable to geologists across the Pacific Northwest. This is not just any dust, this is the Set S tephra from Mount St. Helens, a distinct layer created by a prehistoric eruption and dated with remarkable precision to about 15,600 years ago. For archaeologists, such ash layers are a rare gift. Each eruption leaves behind a chemical fingerprint, a regional marker that locks everything below it in time. At Rimrock Draw, that ash forms a clean, unbroken horizon, sealing the deeper sediments from the world above. Just beneath this ancient cap, the team uncovered something extraordinary: fragments of tooth enamel from Camelops hesternus, the species often called yesterday's camel. These animals, towering 7 feet at the shoulder, once wandered the sagebrush steppe where the shelter stands. The enamel was carefully sampled and sent to 2 of the most respected radiocarbon labs in the field, Stafford Research and UC Irvine, where scientists used accelerator mass spectrometry, AMS, to count the rare radioactive carbon atoms left in the fossil. The result was clear and repeatable, 18,250 years before present. That means the camel lived and died nearly 3,000 years before the Set S eruption blanketed the site. The context of the find matters just as much as the date. The camel tooth fragments came from a layer immediately below the ash, undisturbed by later activity. In the same sediments, archaeologists recovered obsidian chips, the unmistakable byproduct of human toolmaking. While the camel's fate remains a mystery, the association between ancient megafauna and stone flakes beneath the ash points to a human presence in Oregon's high desert at least 18,000 years ago. The ash acts as a forensic seal, a natural timestamp that rules out later contamination or mixing. Below it, the clock runs backward, and the evidence pushes the story of the first Americans into a far deeper past than textbooks ever allowed. Orange agate scrapers, shaped by ancient hands, surfaced deep in the Rimrock Draw shelter, buried beneath the volcanic ash, and even below the camel teeth dated to over 18,000 years ago. These tools stand out not just for their age, but for the material itself. Orange agate does not occur naturally in the basalt cliffs that form the shelter's walls. Sourcing this stone required either long-distance travel or exchange with distant groups, hinting at a network of movement and knowledge stretching across the Ice Age landscape. Each scraper was carefully chipped to a razor edge, the kind of precision that speaks to practiced skill and a clear purpose. One of these scrapers went under the microscope for residue analysis. Within its tiny fractures, scientists detected traces of ancient blood proteins, evidence that the tool had been used to process large game, most likely bison. These proteins can linger for millennia, protected from the elements inside the stone's micro-crevices. The discovery goes beyond speculation. It ties human activity directly to the hunting and butchering of Ice Age megafauna in central Oregon, long before the Clovis points appeared elsewhere. The position of these tools, stratigraphically deeper than the camel enamel dated to 18,250 years before present, means the minimum age for human presence at Rimrock Draw could be even older. This is not an isolated pattern. At Cooper's Ferry in Idaho, stone tools date back more than 16,000 years. Meadowcroft Rockshelter in Pennsylvania has yielded evidence as old as 19,000 years. And in New Mexico, human footprints at White Sands have been confirmed between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. Together, these sites reveal a continent already inhabited by skilled hunters and travelers thousands of years before the Clovis culture ever left its mark. The story told by the Rimrock Draw tools is part of a broader, deeper narrative, one that rewrites the timeline of the first Americans. Each new layer buried beneath Oregon's high desert shows how much of America's human story remains unwritten. As discoveries outpace old theories, the real frontier is our willingness to question what we think we know. History doesn't end, it waits, just beneath the surface. What do you think?